Hello, my friends! You ever read something that really, succinctly validates all your feelings about something? Well, I was browsing the Phoenix Point forums because I was trying to jog my memory on some vanilla details, like the Empress mission, for example, which I vaguely remember, but I vaguely don't remember. So I'm just, reading around the subject to refresh my own mind. And I saw a thread about a new player asking whether they should start with this mod or not. Anyway, I'll bring up the post. I think that's the easiest thing to do. No, it's not letting me scroll now. What a pain in the butt. Do I have to show it to scroll? Okay, I have to show it to scroll. Okay, here we go. New player. Should I start with Terror from the Void? If it just improves the game in every way, then that's what I prefer, but I also don't want to do it if there are concerns about how it changes the vanilla experience. Okay. So, fair enough. This person's asking, is Terror from the Void just an upgrade to vanilla? Should I just play it straight away and ignore the base game? Or should I play the base game first? And one of the, I think it's the lead guy from the mod. If it's not the lead guy, then it's one of the most, public-facing members of their team. Replied to this and said, if you have experience with the genre and confidence in your abilities, then Terror from the Void on Veteran for a first run is a great option. If you're less confident, then Rookie if you want a completely stress-free experience story mode. And I agree with all of this in that, the mod does offer a lot of low-level difficulty options, which is great for new players and a very customizable experience. So that's fine. So I'm certainly not going to say anything about the game at lower difficulties. And then it says, we have a lot of players experiencing Phoenix Point for the first time through Terror from the Void, and the feedback has been really positive as long as they didn't go for a high difficulty setting. Now, there is a type of player. When anyone starts a sentence like this, they're going to be disparaging and negative and beat down on somebody. But anyway, we'll carry on. They completed Vanilla on Legend or played every UFO since 1992 or have 10,000 hours in XCOM 2 and therefore consider themselves a bona fide expert and throws Terror from the Void on Legend or even Extermies. For some reason, we've had quite a lot of those during the beta, and almost always the feedback from them is rage quit and rant on bad design. Now, this type of player that you're talking about, the people who like to challenge themselves, who like difficulty, okay, and the people who beta test, because he said, we had a lot of these during the beta, the people who beta test, they are the most hardcore players, usually with the highest skill level, who are very passionate about the game, who put the hours in, who know exactly how to play, and they want to be challenged. Now here, it's just talking like, this just implies that these people have no clue, or that this guy's mod is so special that even though you have crushed the game, the original game, on the hardest difficulty, their mod is so special that you're like a babe in the hands of their mod. You don't understand the mod, so therefore you're going to get wrecked on the highest difficulty. Basic implication that, people who choose to play on the highest difficulty are full of hubris. But you'll see here that those kinds of people, the people who understand mechanics the best, who play the most, have said that they've made rants on bad design. Now, I already discussed about some bad design elements in this, like, for example, if you play on the hardest difficulty and you let it choose a random base for you, it won't choose a random base for you. It will choose you a base where you're locked on the South Pole or in Australia, and you can't get off, and you lose the game immediately because you're soft locked on a continent you can't get off of. Right? That's just a trap. That's, that's just poor design. That's what that is. That is unfair, and it's poor design. How does a player... Let's say that someone is the most skillful, most talented player in the world. How do they cope with the fact that they've been soft-locked on a continent and can't get off? And so therefore can't get the early resources that they need to actually get into any kind of winning position in the mid-game. Right? Their skill is completely irrelevant to whether they win the game or not. And that's bad design. That is bad design. And so my hope for this mod, that it would provide a very interesting, that maybe it would develop into an interesting challenge and maybe feel a bit less unfair as it developed. Well, my hope for this mod just went out the window. And this post kind of just validates my thoughts, because it says to me that the team behind this mod look down on or see with disdain players with the highest skill level, because they are, quite rightly, calling out the design flaws, not the flaws in their own gameplay or in their skill level, but the actual design flaws in the mod, and the modders are just like, no, you're just not good enough. You just don't understand. All that other stuff that you did in the past, all those XCOM Impossible Iron Mans and XCOM 2 Impossible Iron Mans and Phoenix Point, legendary difficulty wins. None of that matters. All that matters is that you understand the mod. But there's nothing to understand. If you get locked in the bottom continent, you just lose. How do you improve your play? Go back to the start menu and choose the China base. And the guy that the difficulty level that is named after, that guy, Extermes, he just chooses to start in China. So he obviously is their most favoured playtester, so he understands the mod at the highest level, and he chooses not to start down there, knowing that it's a trap. So this just kills any hope I had at all that this mod will develop into something good in the mid and late game, because of this response. Now, I did put my own response here, which I'll read out. Just in the same thing. I said, I feel like this might be because your highest difficulty level is badly designed if you're constantly getting this kind of feedback. So he's had all these high-level players, high-level beta testers, all these 10,000 hours people tell him that the design is poor. I don't mean to pick on you, and I don't. I genuinely mean that. I am a classical game designer. I have a degree in it, an honours degree in it. So, and I work for a games company. So I understand games design at that level, in addition to just being a huge TPS nerd. As I said, for example, on the hardest difficulty, enemies can spawn... Oh, sorry, I've skipped a paragraph here. I don't mean to pick you, but you've dismissively said... The way you've dismissively said this makes me think that you are not receptive to this kind of feedback. And having played your mod on the hardest difficulty, I do feel that you don't understand the difference between difficulty, hardness, and challenge, that broad umbrella of taxing your brain and making the best decisions, and simple unfairness. For example, on the hardest difficulty, enemies can spawn at spawn points and immediately on the same turn get their go. On tight maps, there is no way to avoid being near a spawn point and potentially instantly losing a unit to a dangerous enemy spawning in your face and getting a free go. Is there any way to prevent this? No. It is simply unfair design. And there isn't. There's no way to prevent it. And you certainly don't have the spare actions to, have your whole team overwatch spawn points on the vague chance that an enemy spawns there. Because you've got other things to do. You've got enemies to kill, you've got mission objectives to achieve. You've got to be dealing with the here and now. So you don't really have the spare action economy to place 1 million overwatches on a spawn point. And what if the enemy that spawns is one of these incredibly heavily armoured ones? What if you're against the pure and it's one of those all over 50 armour jobbies? You could have 6 guys overwatching a spawn point and he could spawn there, tank all that damage and still kill somebody. Anyway, I started going into examples here. So on the hardest difficulty, the UI lies to you, especially when it comes to the amount of damage your weapons do. UI should never lie to the player. If you've reduced damage or enemy takes less damage, and it's seemingly both, UI should reflect that. Makes calculating your moves almost impossible. On the hardest difficulty, the enemy seems to get more speed than makes any sense, and/or than they have any right to have. Enemies with nearly 30 speed make the whole concept of the game moot. And this is the whole concept of this type of game that is undermined by this. That concept being that players choose the best positioning and take the best shots. But the player's position increasingly doesn't matter when enemies can run over the entire length of the map and still hit you. There isn't anywhere to be that is safe. A player cannot use their skill or intelligence to outthink an enemy, positioning to drain their AP for a counterattack. This is the classic turn-based play where you assess how much the enemy can move and where they can hit, and you position just behind that so that they can't engage onto you, but they come closer. And then on your turn, you then engage them, and they're in a much more vulnerable position. You know, classic turn-based strategy. But this is not possible, because if the enemy is so fast that they can mindlessly charge in from Spain and still have AP left to kill someone. This is, you know, I should read this sentence properly, because otherwise it doesn't make sense, but there isn't anywhere to be safe. A player cannot use the skill and intelligence to outthink an enemy, positioning to drain their AP for a counterattack if the enemy is so fast that they can mindlessly charge in from Spain and still have the AP left to kill someone. And here I just go on and say, I expected to see nerfs to enemies that are known for their poor balance and unfairness. Myrmidons in particular are a special kind of bullshit, is what I wrote here. Steam censored it. Especially the ones that explode, but instead they are just as powerful as before, only this time the player has less tools and meta cheese to counter them with. You know, I've spoken about Myrmidons before. Their problems are myriad, but the biggest one is that basically they have a tiny, annoying hitbox that's almost impossible to hit. They have quite a lot of hit points for being such a small target, like 170 at least. I want to say they go up to like 300. I'm not sure. It might be 240. Either way, 170 with a tiny hitbox is still plenty. They fly, and they have like a 1 AP 70 damage attack. And then the later ones explode in a massive area. It's almost impossible to stop them from getting on top of you. And to be honest, they only had 20 movement. I've seen enemies, or like 24 movement at the most. But I've seen enemies in this mod so far. I think we've seen 29, 30 movement, which is crazy. There we go. I said, in fact, their mechanics have spread to other units. Mine fraggers now explode into acid. There was a reason why exploding units like worms were very slow. But now you face 20 plus movement suicide units that are nearly impossible to prevent from closing in. This is combined with the fact that they were always too small, and thus relatively tough to kill from any kind of safe distance. This is talking about Myrmidons here, of course. Feels like the game is designed for players to re-roll the map they get over and over until they get a relatively easy one, rather than provide a challenge for top players who otherwise crush XCOM style games on the hardest levels. It is exceptionally easy to make an impossibly unfair mod. And it is. It is exceptionally easy to make an impossibly unfair mod. You're not in the business of making an impossibly unfair mod, or an impossibly unfair game. Talking about game developers here. You're in a position of offering an extremely difficult challenge. And that should minimize unfairness. So, the best player in the world should be able to win every time. Whereas, someone who's maybe very good, but not the best, might lose, or struggle. But that's the point, is if the best player in the world, or like some imaginary god who always makes the perfect decisions, still loses, then evidently your game or mod is simply unfair. It's not challenging or difficult, you've just added elements of unfairness to it that mean that there is the potential to lose irrespective of your skill level or your experience. Yeah. This is a quote that I've heard around from time to time. This is the old Captain Picard Star Trek quote. It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness, that is life. That's what Picard said. Developers said, what developers say is, but it makes for exceptionally shitty gameplay. And it does. And it does. Like, the whole premise of a game is that it's fair, right? That's why games have rules and are constructed in such a way. The players play to win, and they win by being given fair paths to victory. It is very possible, I just really emphasizing what I said here, it's very possible to play as perfectly as is possible and still just lose in Terra from the Void on hardest. This is an issue of design, not the players giving you their feedback. And this is the biggest thing for me, is they apparently got all this feedback in beta from players that the hardest difficulty level was unfair and poorly designed, and they just ignored it all. They just ignored it all and took this attitude that they're rage quitters, that they can't handle the mod, so they're rage quitters. This type of player that rage quits. And you'll see here as well, like, thanks for giving the mod a fair chance. But, you know, those beta testers, those high-level players, they sat down, they installed your mod, they played it. They gave your mod a fair chance. That's what they were doing. They were giving you the fair chance by sitting down and playing your mod. Do you know how many games I have in my Steam library? I have probably the best part of 600 games. That's not even a joke. You know, and I get sent by developers, I get sent games every week. Maybe like 1 or 2 games a week, every week. Developers send me, oh, would you play my game on your channel? Would you look at my game? You know, I even get sent, I get sent stuff that doesn't fit the channel. And I do write back to them and I say, look, I don't normally play FPS on my channel, or I don't play sports games or racing games or those kinds of things, so I can't cover this on my channel. So when people take the time out from the horde of choice that they have, so many games that they could be playing, they take that precious time and they install your mod and they play it, and they play it a lot, and they give you their feedback. They are giving you a fair chance. And it feels to me like you're just spitting in their face and saying, actually, you're wrong. You're just not good enough at the mod. That's the problem. It's not the problem that you think it's badly designed and that you rage quit, which I doubt, because very high level players have usually got very good control of their mental. It's as the Koreans call it. It's like when you play a lot of very high pressure multiplayer, or you play in front of an audience all the time, you have very strong control of, when things go wrong, you handle it, you get on with it, that kind of thing. You have this mental fortitude of dealing with losses and so on. There are some ragers out there, but I generally find that the people who rage are not actually that good player-wise. You always see that top champions and top players, real experts, do not lose control when they encounter unfair situations. They call it out, but they don't lose control. And this commentary that they're dismissive commentary that they're rage quitters, it really says to me, there's a real lack of understanding that this feedback about fairness is valid. And restarting missions over and over until you get a good one, as it were, or one that is less unfair, or one where an enemy doesn't spawn right next to you and kill 2 of your guys, and you're just like, well, nothing I could have done about that, so I'll just restart and try again. Like that is even necessary is bad design. And I'm certainly not saying that I'm flawless, or any of these people that gave, I don't know who these people are that gave feedback before me, who these beta testers were, or anything like that. This mod only came up to me recently because Starsign wanted to sponsor it, to see what it was like. But reading this validates everything in my mind about what I was coming to feel about the modding team or the modders behind this, which is simply that there is a lack of understanding as to, at the highest difficulty level, you are trying to provide the greatest difficulty and the most challenge, but the least unfairness. That's what players look for. That's what they're after. And, you know, adding a load of unfairness and then just being like, oh, life's unfair, get over it. Oh, rage quit more, noob. It's a problem of your game's design. Not a problem with the players at all. You know, I can sit down and play StarCraft against Flash, okay, and he will beat my ass every time. That is maximum challenge, that is maximum difficulty. But 0% unfairness. The maps are fair, the maps are balanced, he's got the same tools as me. He's just better. He's just better than me. Full stop. Right? So, in this situation, Flash has provided me maximum difficulty, maximum challenge, but 0% unfairness. Right? There's nothing unfair mechanically about the game, or the positions we were given, or the resources that we had, or anything like that. I could beat him if I was so much better than I am now. Right? I could go away and practice for 10,000 hours and get incredibly good at the game and sit down and maybe I could take a game off him. That's what maximum difficulty is. That's what maximum challenge is. With no unfairness. The problem, the cause of me losing is that I'm just not as good as him. The end. The cause of losing in Phoenix Point is RNG shots that just go off into space, RNG enemies that just spawn out of nowhere and kill you, RNG missions that some of them are incredibly easy, but some of them are almost impossible. You get ones where you just spawn completely surrounded by extremely dangerous enemies with no hope, and then you get another one where the objective is right next to your guys, and so is the exit, and you just get the objective and walk out. And so on and so forth. So, anyway, I apologize that this episode is a 20-minute rant, and I'll put this in the comments, and I'll just say that there's no gameplay for this one. This is just me ranting. But I don't hold much hope for this game to develop into something special now, having read that from I think it's the lead developer, or at least a member of the modding team. So I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding there of that feedback, that valuable feedback that you dismiss as rage quitters and people who don't get it. They're probably actually giving excellent feedback that would improve this mod. But if you are unreceptive to that feedback, then the game is not going to improve, right? It's never going to get better. If anything, it probably get harder and less fair in equal measure. But it's the unfairness factor that is what makes it painful to play. That is what makes it bad. You want to minimize the unfairness and increase the difficulty. Which is why I said things like, you could make all the enemies slower and much tougher, so that you can spend a lot of time outmaneuvering them and picking them off. Get rid of infinite spawns, because that's just a mechanic that you can never balance. And instead just put more enemies on the map. Things like that. You can make the game harder by putting more enemy assets on the field and making them more dangerous, as long as there is pathways to beating them. Giving them tons of speed is a huge problem. You know, in some games, some tactical games, you do get units that have incredibly high speed, but they're usually incredibly fragile, or have some other massive weakness that kind of offsets it. And generally speaking, the player's ability to select positions and maneuver is their asset. So the enemy's assets need to be something else. Needs to be high health, lots of firepower, numbers, those kinds of things. But when the biggest asset of your team, which is their speed and their ability to maneuver, is outmuscled by the AI, then you find yourself with you find yourself basically being able to be brute forced down very easily, which is a big problem in its own right. So anyway, it would take me a long time to sit down and actually design out what I would fix and what I wouldn't fix and all that kind of thing. I'm not that spiritually invested in Phoenix Point to give it that kind of time. But there are many obvious things which I would have changed. And as I said, to see that someone is not receptive, not only not receptive to this kind of feedback, but also disparages the type of person that gives it, gives me a little hope. But I will play this some more. I will give it a fair number of episodes for sure. I'm in a modestly decent position now anyway. But yes, that attitude from what I believe is the lead dev or one of the dev team for this mod is incredibly discouraging to me, because, you know, instantly that says to me that this is not going to get any better. And that's a real shame. Anyway, that's it for this rant. That's it for this episode. I know some people love rants, but some people don't, so I'll just put in the comments that, you know, this is a rant episode and not a gameplay episode. I hope maybe you enjoy these kind of rants, so I hope maybe you've enjoyed it. But at least I hope that you've learned something about design. And I know some of you fully understand this already and have made comments about such things in other campaigns. It's almost always modded campaigns where we've seen these kind of things before, and you guys have made similar comments that you fully understand this concept. It's just very unfortunate that it seems like the team behind this does not. Okay, I'll see you guys next time.